coffee.
Joining us now on the Comcast Business Hotline. Every day in business, a big day. Let Comcast Business help you move forward with what's next. From ESPN, our man Jeremy Fowler joins us. Jeremy, good morning. Hello.
Hey, good morning, guys.
What's up, Jeremy?
I was mesmerized by the Wawa reading. It makes me want to go to Wawa.
Yeah.
Stuff. That was good.
It's always a good day to go to Wawa, especially during the holidays. Wawa, happy holidays, Johnny.
I said yesterday, Jeremy, I was, just as we always follow your reporting and talking about the Eagles, we were surprisingly talking about Jalen Hurts yesterday. And it was the idea of Jalen Hurts and how bad things have gotten here and whether they can be fixed. And you had some observations on it, and I wanted you to be able to share them with our audience.
Yeah, so each week my colleague Dan Graziano and I do a notebook, a buzz file, just on musings around the league. We hit on topics and hit on various notes. And, just when I'm talking to people around the league about the Eagles and about the offense situation, some of the struggles there, it came up a few times that, more just predictions from people, whether it's from teams or industry sources or, hey, there could be a situation where, or at least I predict that the Eagles will end up drafting a quarterback somewhere. Maybe they do what they did with the Carson Wentz to Jalen Hurts handoff years ago, where they draft somebody in the second round, like day 2. That would be there's a blueprint for that Howie Roseman has shown that could pay off again. Doesn't mean that Jalen Hurts would be replaced. Maybe he wouldn't be replaced at all. That it just, in that scenario, you'd get somebody else in there that you can groom as a potential starter down the road, and Jalen would obviously be the starter in 2026 to begin the year. So just a notion, just sort of taking some predictions from some people. It's like they're doing the same thing with A.J. Brown. Did they trade Brown this offseason just because of all the back and forth this year and just, all the commotion? Now it's interesting. The story with the Eagles offense really does center around Hurts. It's like, how is he going to redirect this end of season in his own story, as opposed to A.J. Brown's now getting the ball, right, and they're still losing. So to me, Hurts is the story.
Now, you mentioned that they could draft a quarterback in the second round, day 2, just to back up Hurts, but to groom as well. When this happened the last time, Carson Wentz didn't handle it very well. Do you know, based off of who you've spoken to, if Jalen Hurts would have a similar reaction to the way Wentz had it when they drafted Jalen Hurts?
I really don't. I mean, he's a personality who's known to, keep to himself a little bit. He's pretty quiet. He's not the kind of rah-rah, maybe typical quarterback you see. He's just kind of got that steely personality. So he probably would be really hard to read one way or the other in that regard. But we know about his toughness. We know about his competitiveness, his intangibles. I think he would take that the right way and take it as a challenge. Now, we're talking way far down the road. There's no evidence that they're going to do this. This wasn't really a splash report. It was just something that, there was some music. Enough people brought it up that they think it could happen that I wanted to at least mention it. But, doesn't mean anything's going to shake out in that regard. We'll see. But it feels like a time where they could do it, take a shot. Unless they really like Tanner McKee. I mean, I've heard good things about him. He had a good preseason. Mm-hmm. Haven't seen a lot of action or really hard evidence that he could do it. So, but it seems like he is well liked behind the scenes from all that I've heard and indicated.
And isn't Tanner McKee, though, next year, they have to make a decision on him anyway, as he'll be in the final year of his contract. So wouldn't they probably be drafting a quarterback anyway? Or maybe thinking of flipping McKee, which has been something that they maybe have done in the past?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is it just feels like a good time to reset that position a little bit. I mean, Jalen's in year 6 now?
Yeah,
and last year wasn't a consideration because they're coming off a Super Bowl, right, and clearly they have their guy. I do go back to, and part of the reason why I do this, but I do these rankings in the summer. I rank the top 10 players each position, but it's through scouts and execs and coaches, and they all, I compile rankings from them, so it's like a composite ranking. And with Jalen, he was number 9, and at the time that was even kind of controversial. Now you wouldn't put him at number 9. Things change a lot. So my point is, back in April, they clearly had a guy, but they had a guy with some questions that at least people in the league see as like a quarterback that's a little dependent. In this case, he's kind of dependent on a good running game. And when that hasn't been there this year, some things have probably gotten exposed a little bit. And so I think now it's a different time. Plus, like you said, McKee is going into his final year. Like, they're going to need reinforcements regardless. It's never a bad time to draft a quarterback, even day two. Like, you see teams like the Packers have done that in the past. Just take one and develop them and see what happens. It's the most important position.
You mentioned how people around the league view Jalen Hurts. So I'll ask you, are there people that are really not that shocked by his play this season? Because we all knew going into it that the plan was to stop Saquon. If you were a defensive coordinator, your first order of business was, let's stop number 26, and then we'll take care of the rest. So are there people around the league not that surprised?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, there are people that are not surprised, I would say. I can't speak for the whole building, but I think there are probably people there that are not all that surprised. Because the formula last year was you're getting 40-yard runs at least once a game from Saquon, or at least a big gain, right, an explosive run. They just had it rolling. They were on a heater last year, but the passing game was ranked really low. So it's not that there's some surprise because Jalen Hurts is playing that poorly. I think in some ways he's probably playing better, but just because they're having to rely on the passing game a little more and try to get a little more creative where they can. It's just, talking to people around the league, they would say his game has limitations. Throwing over the middle of the field is one, and if you don't have a steady running game, it's just hard. It's hard to rely on that. He's dependent on having those things around him. You saw it at the end of the first half of the Chargers game, where it wasn't like a explosive drive, but it was a longer drive with several runs from Saquon where he was getting, 9 or 5 or 11. And then you saw Jalen have back-to-back 11-yard passes or on different downs, but one was off play action. And it looked like the drive was supposed to look for them. And they ended up having a penalty, and I think they kicked the field goal. But, like, the glimpses are there of what they kind of need to be. And then Hurts, like, he throws a great go ball, down the sideline. You saw A.J. Brown late in the game. Like, he can do that. That's perfect to complement a really good running game. So when you don't have that, I think the story of the Eagles season is just, the line is not, it's a shell of what it was. It just is. They're beat up. They lost pieces. Obviously, Lane Johnson's been out. You could argue Mailata hasn't been quite as good. Tyler Steen is more of a pass protector. He's probably better in that realm than he is as like a mauler like Mekhi Becton was. There's just a lot of different pieces. Landon Dickerson's been beat up. Cam Jurgens has been beat up. It's just been a hard year for their line. And that's showing not just with Jalen Hurts, but with everything.
ESPN's Jeremy Fowler with us here on Kincade and Salciunas. So you mentioned that there might be even some people inside NovaCare that aren't that surprised by how it's looked. So do you believe, based off of your reporting, who you've talked to either with the Eagles or around the NFL, that sometimes the Eagles may go to bed at night thinking, what if we had somebody else? Despite them going to 2 Super Bowls, winning one last year, I do believe it's human to think, what if that guy played here? Or what if that guy was the quarterback here? Do you think that's crept into their minds at any point?
I can't say that. I mean, like, to your point, it is human nature to wonder that. Or even, I've wondered, like, when I was ranking quarterbacks, it was kind of close between Jalen Hurts and Baker Mayfield. And I did think to myself, would the Eagles rather have Mayfield in their offense or like a Jared Goff in their offense than Jalen Hurts? I would probably say yes. Some would disagree, because of Hurts' running ability and some of the other things he can do. And by the way, the design runs haven't been what they were last year either for Hurts. Like, for whatever reason, he's effective in that role. It just hasn't been cooking like it was a year ago with that. So that does affect the passing game and everything else. So I don't know that the Eagles look at it that way. I can't speak for them in that regard, but I think, this is a smart team with a lot of good people in the organization. They map things out over long periods of time. They certainly know what their quarterback can and can't do and what might be available down the road or what is impossible to get down the road. You're only as good as your options. So Jalen Hurts has been their best option for a long while now.
Jeremy, I'd find a common denominator to Jalen Hurts' 2 sort of disastrous seasons, as the media might sort of portray it locally here, being Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni and Kevin Patullo. That they, when he's had competent offensive coordinators, whether it be at Alabama, whether it be at Oklahoma, or whether it be in Philadelphia, he seems to thrive and find a way to be efficient based on his skill set. When he has novice offensive coordinators, Nick Sirianni and the novice offensive coordinator don't seem to be able to put him in a position to succeed.
Yeah, but I understand that. My only caveat, and it's when I talk to coaches, and maybe coaches like to defend other coaches, but they say, watch the Eagles. It's not the play calling. And their line is just not as good, so they can't get the runs, which shows some of Jalen's limitations. It accentuates them, I would say. So that really, to me, is the core issue beyond play calling, you know. So, like, if you're egging Kevin Patullo's house, it's like, okay, great, but I don't think he's the core problem. I really don't. Now, Kellen Moore and Shane Steichen, two guys that had success with Jalen and went on to be head coaches, those guys are really skilled play callers. So certainly it's possible that those guys were just in an elite category, you know. But when I watch the Eagles, I don't see play calling issues. A lot of people around the league don't really either. I mean, you could nitpick a little bit, and I'm sure maybe they missed some moments. That loss to Dallas was rough in the second half, you know. But I think they're also missing a lot of key blocks and penalties. Like, I think there are things happening every play where they'd be close normally, and they're just not pulling it off. Like just the overall cohesion hasn't been there from a just clean football standpoint.
Last thing for you, Jeremy. We appreciate your time as always. The last time we had you on, it was actually leading up to the NFL trade deadline, which was the bye week for the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's when you told us that you spoke to a player that did say there are some feelings of 2023 in the locker room. We just have to try to squash that quickly. That was after they lost back-to-back weeks. Yeah. One to the Broncos where they blew the fourth quarter lead, and then the horrible Thursday night game against the Giants. Since then, they win two. They go to the bye week. They win two tough games, Lions, Packers. But then we know what's happened the last 3 weeks. Have you heard more rumblings about the 2023 feeling inside the locker room since the last time we spoke to you?
Maybe a little. I haven't heard anything about that comparison. The differences in those seasons was, there was some pretty clear tension between Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. I don't think that's there this time. I can't speak exactly on that. What I'm saying is I haven't sensed that there's, a beef there between Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. And, Kevin Patullo's in an interesting position because, he's been with Nick for years. And I think before, he was a pass game coordinator, but he was always sort of a buffer for, like, say, Nick and Jalen or Shane Steichen and Kellen Moore. So now it's pretty much just Kevin. And then they have some new pieces on the staff. But I think all that's probably been a little bit of an adjustment. But Nick and Kevin have a good relationship. I don't think there's any issue with, like, Nick going rogue and taking the whole offense over. You know what I mean? Like, I think, unless that's changed this week, but that's my sense. I think it was a little different. 23 is a little more turbulent in that regard. This year, they're just not very good. I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to. Offensively, it's just not what they want to be. I mean, back in 23, they were a top 10 offense, I believe.
Yep.
And there was still a lot of that turmoil. I think it was because things were spinning fast, and it wasn't quite like it looked the year before. Now they're just trying to adjust. It's different. It's a struggle, but it's slightly different. I don't think it's the same. But I go back to the story kind of being the quarterback, who, the passing game wasn't great last year either. It's just they ran the ball really well. So now it's sort of all on him a little bit with hopes of Saquon getting some breakout runs like he did Monday night. And you go from there. Can Hurts, with his back against the wall, kind of redirect this thing for himself and the team?
Jeremy, we appreciate the time, man. Great stuff as always. Keep up the great work on
Thanks,
ESPN.
Jeremy. Appreciate it, buddy.
Talk to you again soon, hopefully after a long playoff run for the Eagles. We appreciate it.
Hey, sounds good, guys. Appreciate you having me.